Okay, great. I can see there's a good number of you joining now, so we can get started. Hello and welcome to this latest installment in the Business Because Presents webinar series. Business Because, if you don't know, is a leading publication dedicated to graduate management education. My name is Matt Kefford. I'm a senior writer for Business Because and I also lead master's content across our website. Today, we're bringing you an MBA internship workshop. We're looking at how you can land an internship and then use that to successfully launch your career. We have three fantastic panelists joining us to discuss this today, and they're coming from our partners at Copenhagen Business School. Just before we meet those panelists, I'm just going to run through the format of today's webinar so that you'll know what's going on. We're going to run for 45 minutes, and we're going to begin with a presentation for around 15 minutes where each of our panelists will tell us about the CBS MBA experience and what you need to know about MBA internships. After that, you're in charge really, so we're going to have a live Q&A session where our panelists will be answering your questions. We encourage you to enter any questions you have into the Q&A function, which should be available at the bottom of your screen. You can do that at any point during the webinar, and if you have questions already, do feel free to enter them now. You can also vote questions up or down using the Q&A function, and I'll try to do my best to try and pick the questions that have the most votes. And I know some of you have already submitted questions, so we're going to do our best to answer a few of those as well. When asking a question, do also feel free to include some information about your background. It's always nice to know a bit more about you, so tell us where you're from, what industry you're in, what your job title is, and all that sort of stuff. Please note, we won't be using the chat function, so please feel free to talk to each other on there, but we won't be answering questions that are entered into the chat, so do please use the Q&A function for those. So that sort of concludes all the housekeeping rules. So before we begin the presentation, I'd just like to go around the room and give our panelists a chance to briefly tell us a bit more about who they are and what they do at CBS. So Andy, if you don't mind, I'll start with you. The floor is yours. Could you just introduce yourself?
Sure, my name's Andy. I'm from the MBA program's admissions team. So I'm happy here to help with any questions around admissions practicalities, anything like that. Brilliant,
thank you, Andy. And Maria, could you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Maria. I sit in the careers team, but I also manage the alumni network. So I'm really here to answer any questions around the sort of the careers journey after the MBA and during the MBA, and also specifically the internships.
Brilliant, thanks Maria. And lastly, Catherine, could you just introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Catherine. I am a recent alumna. I just graduated about a month ago, and I converted my internship. So that's why we're here.
Excellent. We look forward to hearing more about that. Thank you all very much for joining today, and also to all of you in the audience, thank you for joining. It's a pleasure to have you with us. So we're now going to go ahead and get started with our presentation, which I'm going to launch on screen now. So if you just bear with me, I'm going to share my screen. It's now asking me for privacy, to accept privacy details. Bear with me 1 second. Andy, do you happen to have it? I believe my my settings on my laptop aren't being very helpful here. Sorry, you're muted. Sorry to spring this on you.
That's all right. Here's me saying it's well, how long have we been doing these now? Okay,
know,
cool.
Yeah,
yeah, I've got it open in front of me, so maybe I can share my screen as an alternative.
Yeah, that should be possible.
Just give me a moment. It's just opening the document.
No worries. In the meantime, do feel free to send in your questions, as we're going to get to that in a few moments. I do apologize about this. As you say, Andy, we've been doing this for a very long time, and yet still technological issues do happen.
To be fair, while it opens, I can actually talk more generally about Copenhagen Business School, because that's where we would start anyway.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, do feel free.
And I think for those of you who don't know us, the clue is in the title. We're based here in Denmark, in Copenhagen. We've been around a long time, actually, over 100 years. About 20,000 students. So in fact, one of the biggest business schools in Europe. But the MBA programs where we're from is relatively smaller scale. It's 3 MBA programs, but we're more connected to what we call our full-time MBA program, which is a year-long intensive program. So I will just share my screen as it's finally loaded. Yeah, okay. I think we just need to switch me as the host, if that's possible.
Just doing that now.
Great. And just for simplicity, I'll keep it in this mode just to not, if that's all right with everybody, so I can skip and we can still see each other.
Yeah, no problem at all.
But yeah, if we can go to this one. Yep. Okay. Seems like we're up and running. Please do shout if you can't see anything or you can't hear us. But yeah, basically, we thought it'd be helpful for us to give you maybe 5 minutes of context about which program we're from and which school we're from, just so you understand, okay, the main body of this presentation today, yeah, you'll be hearing about exactly what the title suggests about internships and how to utilize them and how to utilize them from an MBA perspective. But we thought it would be important to give you a bit of context about the Copenhagen MBA. So you'll see a few things when you, depends who's on the call today, depends who's, you know, what sort of level of research you've done before you've come to start looking at MBAs. But generally speaking, there's thousands of MBAs out there. So how do you actually start to then narrow down in terms of quality and benchmarking? And you'll start to see a lot of things regarding triple accreditation and rankings. And I think that's a useful benchmark. It's not the be all and end all, but it's a good starting point for quality. So a triple accredited business school is generally considered, there's about 100 of them worldwide, and they're generally considered to be in the top echelon of business schools, and in fact CBS is one of those, hence me talking about it. And then also some rankings are very useful, such as Financial Times, QS, there's Bloomberg, there's several really, but depending on what your weighting of priorities is, have a look at those. But obviously we do so well in several of those, but it's also depending on what your interests are too. In terms of the program itself, we're, like I say, a 1-year full-time program, but actually relatively small. For a triple accredited business school, we're only about 40 to 45 students per year. So we spend a lot of time on our diversity of our cohort and making sure that that's lots of different backgrounds in terms of education, industry, role, nationality. And that translates into, we have over 90% of our students are international students. Typically, they're coming to Copenhagen to spend a year with us, and actually in a quite a high percentage, between 50 and 80%, depending on the year, actually staying on in Denmark afterwards to sample the workplace here and to sort of elevate their career, but here in Denmark afterwards. We absolutely, you know, completely flexible if you don't do that, but I think it's partly down to, you know, it's a very attractive post-MBA job market, partly the structure of the program here in Denmark, and then also a very sort of generous, it's not called that here, but a post-study work visa. It's called an establishment card here. So a little bit on the structure of the program, and then I'll cover practicalities, a bit about Copenhagen, and then I'll pass on to my colleagues. So as you can see, it's structured across 4 terms, and you'll start to understand now how the internship project comes into it. We're a general management MBA. We're looking to create leaders who want to move on to the next step in their career with this sort of Scandinavian style of leadership, but also a really core focus on sustainability. But your first 3 terms are really your core modules. So that first term is what we think is important for you, understanding the internal sort of makeup of your organization. And you can see the core modules there are sort of orientated towards the internal aspects of your organization. The second term moves on to exploring the environment that will affect your organization, things like macroeconomics, marketing, corporate finance. The third term is how do you execute those on a strategic level? So we're looking at implementation, but from things sort of supply chain management point of view, innovation, and of course, strategy. So those first 3 terms are your core modules. And then that final 4th term is where you get a chance to personalize the program through our concentrations, which is where you go deep dive into an elective that you want to choose. And then our strategy project, which is our MBA level internship that you'll hear a lot more about from our colleagues. So you're getting that hands-on experience for those final 4 months and can cater it towards where you would like to personalize. I think I'll jump over this next slide just because I know we're going to talk about that a lot in the webinar itself. And then just to give you some practicalities in terms of the admissions details, basically we ask for people to have a bachelor's degree or higher. And in terms of actually coming onto the program, we ask you to have 3 years of work experience post that bachelor's degree, just so you can have a number of strong examples to bring into the course with you. The average work experience, however, is usually around 6 or 7 years. The average age, it moves per year, to be honest, because we're quite a small program, but it's a very diverse background in terms of people's education majors where they're coming in. We do ask for a GMAT or a GRE. Minimum would be 600, but the class average is usually around 650. And if you're coming from a non-English speaking background, so if you haven't done a bachelor's degree in English or you don't work primarily in English, we do ask you for having an English test to come in with. So typically that's IELTS 7. We assess applications on a rolling basis. So every 2 weeks we have an admissions board where we're looking at potential students. And then just the final practicality as well is the tuition fees, 330,000 Danish kroner. Obviously depends on the exchange rate, but that typically works out about 50,000 US dollars, about 44,000 euros. So have a look at the immediate exchange rate there. But I would say we have got a good number of scholarships. There's a big drive to try and get more international talent here to Denmark. So we do get some good funding in regards to scholarships, and just received some more actually. So at the moment, it's up to 40% of tuition fees, and you apply in the same way that you apply for your program. And it's based on very similar criteria for your program application. So it's relatively straightforward. So I would encourage you, if something does catch your attention today and you want to take it on to the next stage, then definitely do have a look at the scholarships offerings as well. And then finally from me, just in terms of why Copenhagen, that might be coming across your mind. I've obviously focused on the structure, but I think this does translate into the workplace as well, and your internships too. I would genuinely say I'm not from Denmark. I moved here about 2 years ago, and I genuinely do forget sometimes that it's a non-English speaking country because the English proficiency is so high, and so many of the companies that we interact with, business language is English. So I would say you don't need to come in with any Danish. Obviously, we've got that in the course if you want to learn some Danish, but it's very comfortable place to come and integrate if you are an English speaker. And it has been very prosperous in terms of the economy post-pandemic. It's definitely not been as adversely affected as other countries, and a very safe and happy. I know it's a cliche about Denmark, but it really does translate into your day-to-day on the course and working afterwards. And like I say, they are really trying to drive for global talent here. It's probably the most international city in the Scandinavian region. So are we doing questions as we go, or are we saving them until the end?
We'll do questions after the presentation. So if you'd just like to pass on to Maria, I think that's all good.
Great. Do you want me to do the slides for you, Maria?
Yes, please.
No problem. So just say politely when you want to move on.
Go to the next one.
Cool.
Perfect. So yeah, hi, I'm Maria, and I sit in the careers team. I'm just gonna talk very briefly about the team itself, and then I'll go on to the careers program and activities that we offer over the course of the year. And as part of that as well, look at the internship, and I'll talk a little bit also about post-MBA career paths. So yeah, and if you can go to the next one, please. So we sort of divide our support up into 3 different buckets. The careers course is part of the program, and you get ECTS for attending the course. So in that sense, we do take it very seriously, and it's embedded into the program for the year. So we look at how can we develop your career skills. We do that through a number of 4 different modules actually, focused on one around defining your career goal, one around networking, building your personal brand, building a LinkedIn profile, Then we have one around CV and cover letters, and then lastly one around interviewing skills. And all those modules are followed by a workbook, and also then followed by a one-to-one session with one of the careers team. And the idea behind that is really that you are all on a different career journey. Some students come into the program having a very clear idea about where they want to end up. Others have absolutely no idea of what they want to do at the end of it, and both are completely fine, which is why we very much see this as to some extent, a tailored program based on where are you in your career journey, and we try to support from where you are. So those one-to-one sessions are quite important in helping with that. And then lastly, our activities are looking at how can we connect you then to the market. And the internship, of course, fits in very well with that topic. But if you go to the next slide, Andy, I have some examples on how we do connect students to the market. So we have a career mentoring program that runs at the latter end of, or sort of the second half of the year, where we try to match the students with a profile, usually an alum that is either in an industry or a job role that you're looking to go into. But we also do sometimes pull in people from outside the program if we haven't had the right match. But really to get you that one-on-one mentoring to help you progress in your career. We then also across the year offer a number of industry and alumni sessions. So at the first half of the year, we have a focus on more inspirational sessions, while people are sometimes still exploring what the options are. So just today, actually, we had a consulting day with our class where we had Capgemini and PA Consulting in to talk about what is it to be a consultant, what are their companies like, recruitment processes, and so on. And then towards the end of the year, it will be a little bit more tailored around where the student's looking to go. So last year, for example, or with the last class, we had a case competition with Danske Bank, one of the major banks here, to really offer that that insight into also the bank, and also for the bank to be able to see the students in action and really see what talent we have on the program. And then lastly, we use our alumni society quite a lot. As I said, I also manage the alumni network, and we really do try and pull the alumni in as much as possible, and really use them to open doors into companies, or just getting that inside information into industries or roles. So Andy, if you go to the next slide, please. So the internships, of course, have also an academic angle. I'm not going to cover that too much in my presentation, but they also have a strong purpose in, giving that exposure to the Danish, usually job market, and companies here, or an industry that you're interested in. So they run from 1st of May to mid-August. It is based on solving a multidisciplinary strategic issue for the company, which you will also be examined on as part of the program. But you will be working at the company, embedded into a team, and spending, on average, we recommend 25 hours a week maximum for those months. And you really do become part of the company at that time. You will have some weeks of commitment at CBS during those months. It's 1 week in May, 1 week in June, and 1 week in July to do the concentrations that Andy talked about, and also a leadership activity. But students really do end up in a very diverse group of companies, as you can see from the overview here. So we have everything from our major corporates in Denmark are still an energy company, or renewables company, over Maersk, the shipping company, over to SMEs like where Catherine has ended up, and also the startup space. And the projects that people have worked on has also differed quite vastly. As long as it has that multidisciplinary strategic angle to it, it can be a whole number of topics. And some students have also ended up being in a consultancy and actually working on a consultancy project, on a client project with that company, and doing their thesis around that. So it can be formatted in a number of different ways. And if you just go back, so I just want to quickly say that we don't promise to source the internships for our students. However, we do offer up the opportunity to our network to host an intern, and there's a very high interest in that from our alumni network and sort of wider stakeholders. So for the class that just finished, we ended up with more projects than students. So we're in a very good position to help open doors, but we don't necessarily promise that we will deliver a project for the students. Some come in already and want to do a project for the company that they're going back to afterwards, or they have a startup maybe that they want to do the project for. So it can differ from student to student. And if you go to the last slide, please. And it's just really to cover sort of where can all this take you at the end of the MBA. You can see here a bit of an overview of our sort of main sectors that students have gone into over the last few years. But again, and also some examples of titles that they have ended up with. But again, the range is quite wide. So I don't think life sciences is there, but the sustainability field is growing, for example. We're seeing more and more of that. So I'm expecting that to also increase in the coming years. But it is just to give you a bit of a flavor for where can you potentially end up afterwards. So I think I'll leave it at that, because one thing is sort of me talking about it. Another thing is hearing it from someone who's lived it. So I'll hand over to Catherine here.
Hi. So I consider myself an impact professional, and prior to moving with my family to Copenhagen last year, I spent almost 8 years in social impact philanthropy at Seattle Opera. I'm American. I have a CFRE credential, which for those of you in the UK, US, so I was like a fundraising lifer. Obviously Denmark and the US have a lot of cultural differences. One of them is state-funded arts and cultural institutions, and the other is the social welfare culture, and there are very few nonprofits. So I knew that moving here was going to mean that I was going to need to do a complete career transition, both in mindset, so moving from a philanthropy social model into social welfare, but also from nonprofit into for-profit impact strategy. So I also knew that I had a non-traditional career background entering the Danish labor market. Like, very few people who are actually Danes know what fundraising is or what my career would have been. And so I knew I wanted an internship that could help me strengthen that career narrative. And I also was interested in consulting. I was interested in expanding from just purely social impact. I had spent the last couple of years integrating a racial equity plan into my organization's fundraising practice. So it was really social impact heavy. And I'm also curious and passionate about the green transition. So how could I broaden that into an equal portion of environmental impact? And so that's what brought me to Dissing and Whiteling. I have a couple of cool connections to architecture. My family ran a 10-person firm in California for 50 years, and Dissing and Whiteling last year celebrated their 50th anniversary. And my undergraduate education was in architectural history. So I can read architectural plans, even though I'm not an engineer. And I speak that language, which I think helped me establish a relationship with my supervisor, who was an MBA alumna, but also the partners of the firm, because of course it's a small Danish company. Dissing and Whiteling is a legacy firm. So you might know Arne Jacobsen. He designed the egg chair, which is like the most famous of all Danish design. And so it's his company, basically like a legacy of that tradition. And so the Danishness element of it and the small business element of it was really important. And so I saw the internship program as kind of an opportunity to experience like a really intense Danish work culture. It was, I mean, Danish is their corporate language. I spent a lot of my first few weeks translating internal financial statements, which was good practice. And also I was really clear at the time. At the time I did not see any possibility of converting this into a job, in particular because of the Danishness, but also because of how I entered the relationship. Like I saw this as external consulting. I saw this as an opportunity for me to bridge nonprofit arts with an applied arts for-profit business into a sustainability job function elsewhere. And my supervisor and I really created this relationship that allowed for that. So while I was embedded, I wasn't working on any additional projects. I was an external consultant, and I was kind of mirroring the problem identification and hypothesizing. And then I gave myself 2 months to do analysis. And then I gave myself 3 weeks to do the recommendations. And yet I was still able within that to develop relationships. And so now I am an internal consultant tasked with implementing the strategy that I created. But of course, it's more than that. And I'm driving a change process, and I'm doing business development now. So I think even though I went in with a very fixed idea of what the internship would be, it still allowed for conversations to happen and relationships to be built that could springboard other opportunities. So.
Thank you very much, Catherine. That was really interesting to hear your story. And thank you, Andy and Maria, for sharing your information about the school. We've got loads of questions that have already come in, so I'm just going to jump straight in and start asking questions from the audience. So this is the first question, and I'm going to direct this one to you, Maria. So this is a person who's looking for an internship opportunity with companies who are focused on green energy. What kind of opportunities are available at CBS and Denmark in general to gain opportunities in that industry?
Yeah, so we had actually a few people that did their internships in that space with the most recent class. I would say in general, the renewable space in Denmark is one of the strongest sectors. It's one of our so-called sort of clusters of excellence. So there are we have obviously our major sort of flagship corporates like Ørsted and Vestas and others that have a strong presence in the space, but we also have a wide range of consultancies and SMEs in the space, and we have good connections to those through alumni and through the program in general. So I would say that's definitely a strong possibility to be able to land an internship in that space. I think we recently had still ended up putting forward 2 projects for internships. The last round we had an internship in Implement, one of the large consultancies here within the energy team. And those are just the ones that are sort of top of mind right now. But it is one of our key sectors, I would say.
Brilliant, that's great to hear. And obviously, Catherine, you can speak to this as well, so feel free if you wanted to add anything about your own experience.
Well, I was just going to say, because I'm always an advocate for the SMEs. In the first year of the internship, we had somebody convert a job at Seaborg Technology, which is looking at nuclear solutions in the maritime industry. And there are a lot of cool startups and a lot of cool, even established SMEs that are partnering with large Danish corporates. So if you know that you thrive in a smaller environment, there's still that opportunity to be partnering or clustering with these large Danish brands, which could also be something to consider.
Brilliant, thank you. That's really helpful. And Andy, we've actually got a couple of questions that are kind of referencing something you've touched on, but I just wondered if you could help the audience out here. So, a couple of people have asked, in order to work in Denmark, is it necessary to speak Danish? And particularly, if you want to do an internship with a consulting firm like the Big Three or McKinsey or BCG, is it necessary to have to speak Danish, or what could you give to that?
The short answer is no, and it depends on the company. For the latter half of that question, I actually think it might be a good one for you to jump in on, Maria. But even in Danish companies, Catherine, you don't speak Danish, and you've joined even what I'd probably say is more of a Danish orientated company, right?
Yes. I mean, I would say that I was kind of hired when I was actually hired, there was a little bit of an expectation that within 18 months I would be speaking Danish, at least semi-professionally in the office. And that's largely because I think outside of the big corporates and outside of like tech SMEs, most Danish supply chains and like all up and down the value chain do conduct business in Danish. And I would say even Danish corporates, like we're working with a corporate right now, and if it's all Danes on the email thread, it's in Danish and they don't convert it for me. So, I mean, I would say that you have to have a level of patience and humility and awareness that like integration is a really strong value here. And so, yes, it's completely possible. Like there's nothing about me not speaking fluent Danish that impedes on me being able to do my job, being welcomed, being included in the office culture. However, I mean, the longer you choose to stay, the more of an imperative that it is that you can communicate in the Danish language.
Great point. And about the wider question then with the consulting companies, maybe back to you then, Maria.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, was it around speaking Danish or was it?
Danish, yeah.
Yeah, so I think for that, no, that wouldn't be any hindrance whatsoever. I think corporate language in those companies is English, so so that's not a factor at all.
Right, that's great. Thank you, all of you, for chiming in there. So, Andy, why would you recommend to choose Copenhagen for international students, for example, someone from Latin America?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty wide-ranging question. It depends on your specific context and what your personal and professional goals are. And that's sometimes what I talk to people when they're actually asked that question, and when we're at events or something and people ask you that type of question. This is a triple accredited MBA business school, so you're going to get a good experience from that perspective. I would say what makes Copenhagen special, and I moved here 2 years ago, so maybe I can give sort of the foreigners input on this, is the work-life balance thing that you hear about is so true. Like moving from London or moving from more of a hectic, let's say Asia or South America, sort of expected culture in terms of work experience, or work expectation, sorry, not work experience. You really have this sort of concept of what you call 8, 8, and 8, where you sort of have 8 hours to sleep, 8 hours to work, and then 8 hours to yourself. And generally speaking, that really does ring true. I think coming from further afield as well, it's a livable size of city. So it's about 1.5 million people. It's easy to navigate. It's very safe. Like especially moving from London, it just feels so safe. And I think that's what it immediately makes it sort of, when you land, with the level of English, you can land and thrive straight away. You don't need to land and immediately learn Spanish or immediately learn Italian, and that's obviously, maybe in the longer term your Italian or Spanish might be better, but in those first 6 months it really does help you sort of just get going straight away. And it is a place that's really prioritizing. There's some crazy statistics about how much of the workforce is now international, and I would say if you are looking at Northern Europe, if you are looking at Scandinavia in particular, this is the hub of Scandinavia in terms of the international pivot point. Great place to sort of get yourself established in Northern Europe. So yeah, I guess I didn't make a huge move. I didn't make a big as move as from South America, but you know, England feels like it's further and further away at the moment. So it's been really nice being in relatively, you know, stable, happy place. And I think it's been a great move for us. But totally depends on what you're looking for as an individual.
And just another quick one to you, Andy. In terms of scholarships, we've had a couple of questions about scholarships. Does a GMAT score help during that process? Will that help to get a scholarship?
Yes, definitely. But we look at the overall application. So the overall criteria that we look on a general program application, there's not one particular criteria that would count you out or count you in from either the program or a scholarship. But just generally speaking, we want you to sort of be an above average student coming in when, you know, those scholarships are money for us to try and attract the best talent to Denmark. So an above average GMAT would help you towards going to getting that scholarship. And our average in the class is 650. But I encourage students always to keep in contact with us during that process. So maybe if you get a slightly disappointing GMAT and you're super strong on your work experience, your international experience, your leadership potential, your post MBA plans, you know, there's lots of different ways, you know, your previous academic transcripts, of course, come into it too. So there's lots of different factors that come into that. So don't get too hung up on the GMAT, although it is important, of course, or GRE.
Thanks a lot, Andy. And Catherine, this is one for you. Pretty key question, I guess. So how would you describe yourself before and after the MBA at CBS? So what's the practical value of doing the MBA?
I'm much more patient than I was before. No, I would say, so I would say that for me, right, like I had spent my entire pretty lengthy professional career in the nonprofit sector of the US, which has a very different, I mean, the whole relationship with wealth, money, profit, and I was in opera. So like all of that was on even more enhanced, right? And so I was like, it was like being thrown, it was like Danish winter bathing. Like I came to Denmark and like none of that existed, right? So I had to completely it wasn't just reinvention. It was like I had to strip down both like from a career building perspective, every single thing I'd done down to like a very simplified, like this is how it translates to a market that doesn't understand it, but also my values. Like I had been in pretty, I would say, activist spaces, like the community-centric fundraising movement, talking about anti-racism practice within the American wealth system. There was a lot of emphasis on class. There was a lot of emphasis on race. And I mean, none of that was a part of our curriculum. I can be honest and say that, like, it wasn't even in an incredibly diverse cohort, people's willingness to actually have really difficult conversations about anti-capitalism movements, degrowth, like it's just too intensive a year, business ethics. It's just too intensive a year to talk about that. So for me, coming out of it, I think, I mean, in some ways it was a big gift, right? Because there was no way in my career that I would have been separated from all of those conversations, and to sort of have a time out. And I was still obviously like, I mean, I did the governance and sustainability concentration. So like a third of my classes were really about sustainability management and CSR. And so I was not totally separated from the conversations, but I was sort of refocused. So I gained so many more skills, completely different language to talk about it, and kind of an opportunity to reflect on my values and like where that sits in a global context. And so, especially as like an inclusive leader, coming out of it, I'm in a completely different space. Like I know that I could have conversations that are much more nuanced, much less confrontational when they need to be. And that never would have happened if I hadn't done the CBS MBA.
That's great. It's really interesting to hear your experience. And you've touched there on the concentrations, and we've got a question about that. Maria, we'll direct this one to you. So this person has asked, does the internship have to be directly related to whichever concentration you choose?
No, not at all. It can be in a completely different topic. I mean, I think what's important is that you look at what does the concentration give you in terms of where you're looking to go, and then how does the internship also fit in within that. But they don't need to be aligned in terms of topic or anything. But of course, the whole picture needs to add up in terms of where you're looking to go afterwards.
Can I just add something to that?
Absolutely, yeah.
It's really hard to choose, right? And a year is, I mean, it's 11-month program. It's incredibly intense and you only get to take so many classes. So there were 2 of us in my cohort that did sustainability internships and sort of like the thesis project. I did the sustainability concentration. My colleague did not. And I would say that for me, I knew that I was all in and I would regret it if I didn't do it. For her, I think she changed back and forth between sustainability and digitalization, her registration like 3 times. She could not make up her mind. And I do think that the internship is actually a fantastic opportunity to be able to expand a little bit. Like if you're on the fence between 2 domains, being able to make sure that you still have the robustness of exposure to those themes and contexts. And I will say that everyone in the CBS MBA program is really generous, and that just seems to be a theme year over year. And so we all shared the slide decks from the classes with each other so you could learn, but that comes in handy because you do have to do an interdisciplinary report. And so sharing that knowledge is a really key part of how you kind of close out your internship as well.
Thank you very much, Catherine. And Maria, we've got a question here about also about internships. So do you think a consulting internship would be beneficial for someone if they then wanted to go off and pursue an entrepreneurial career?
I think it depends on what are they looking to do in terms of entrepreneurship. I think that's hard to answer without being very specific about where that person is, what kind of consulting internship are we talking about, and then how does that bring them to where they want to be. I mean, anything can make sense under the right circumstances, right? But as I said, a lot of the students also are doing or were doing internships in startups or VC funds, so there are many ways to sort of to get there. So if they're looking to get exposure to a certain industry and it's consulting in that industry because they want to do a startup in that space, yeah, absolutely, it can make sense. If they're looking to build on some specific skills that they can use for their startup or then again, yes, that can make sense. It needs to really be very clear, what does this give you to get to where you want to go?
Okay, that's absolutely great. Thank you. And we've got a really practical question here, Andy. So when is the next intake for the next MBA cohort?
Next MBA intake will be October 2023. Final deadline June 2023 for non-EU students, July 2023 for EU students.
That's great. And then we have just another question. I appreciate we haven't got much time left, but we can just get another couple. Andy, Maria, what proportion of MBA candidates sort of switch their job fields from the job that they had when they came in, and how does that impact finding an internship?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know if I have the numbers exactly. I think
I can jump in and help.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe Andy.
Yeah, because it's quite a common question, so I didn't mean to interrupt you. It's just trying to help out a teammate. But basically, yeah, it's around about last 3 cohorts is about 80% change role, which you'd expect. People are coming in to try and elevate their career. About 60% changed industry. About 70 to 80% were stayed on in Denmark. I think COVID made that a bit higher than it has been previously, because people wanted to stay in Denmark. And then what we might call a triple jump, where people did changed industry, and then changed country, i.e. stay in Denmark, was around 40 to 50%. So that's the last 3 years of last 3 graduating cohorts. I guess that maybe doesn't include actually the very most recent, because that's obviously only just happened. But yeah, sorry, jump back in by all means, Maria.
No, that's fine. Thanks for that. And what was the question on how the internship can help make that happen? Yeah. So, I mean, the internship obviously is relatively new from our side. So this year will be the 3rd time that students have the option to do it. And we see more and more students take up that option. So I think we're nearing 100% of the students doing an internship now. and it is still relatively early to say, but we can see a clear trend already that quite a few of the students that have successfully finished their internships also either end up with a job offer or are in some sort of talks about working for them, or end up being introduced to other companies in that space and having conversations. So it just does give you that practical experience on your CV that you can then take with you when you are job searching. So without having a number, we sort of definitely see the benefit of it, and which is why we're also so keen on supporting our students to find the right internships.
That's great. Thank you very much, Maria. We're just about out of time, but I just wanted to finish on one quick question for you, Catherine, because obviously you've been through this experience. So I thought it'd be nice to hear about this from you. So could you give us one top tip for successfully landing an internship, and then one top tip for impressing during that internship? And if you could do it as briefly as possible, that would be great.
I would say that it's a real gift to be able to go into an internship interview as an MBA student, because you are able to just reflect who you are and where you are in your journey. So staying true to that, like what you want, like what your career goal is, like that. This is the time to say what your dream is when you go into an MBA internship interview. And then, sorry, the second one, well, how to thrive.
Yes, exactly.
I would say just be as open as possible. Every single person in the company is an opportunity to have a coffee chat. Every single person is an opportunity to have lunch with. And that extreme curiosity, right? Like everybody has partners and friends. That's how you really can establish a network in a new country.
That's absolutely great. And we've got through loads of questions here, and we haven't been able to answer all of them, and I apologize for that. So Andy, is there somewhere that people can go if they have further questions?
Yeah, definitely. Maybe I could put my email in the chat, but you also, if you go onto our full-time MBA, the website pages, you'll go on, there's a option to contact us. There's an option to meet us. Chances are we'll probably be in your territory soon enough. We do a lot of face-to-face travel, or we do online fairs as well, or just approach us. We're like we say, we're a small program, so we do give this sort of, I think, really good personal service to people, where if you've heard what you like tonight and want to have a one-to-one chat afterwards, absolutely, you can come along. Would be that okay? Me put my email in the chat for people?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Just put it in the chat, and then people can get in contact if they have any further questions. That's really helpful. Thank you. So thank you very much to Andy, Maria, and Catherine for sharing your time today. And thanks again to all of you in the audience for joining us for what's been a really insightful webinar. Just a note, I saw a few questions about this. You will be sent a recording of this webinar afterwards to look back on, so do look out for that in your inboxes. I'm also now going to launch a poll on the screen, which we'd be really grateful if you could fill out. I mean, it's really helpful for us to know how we're doing with these webinars. So if you could do that, that would be really helpful. Thank you very much. And if you've enjoyed our content today, do check out our website, www.businessbecause.com, for more stories and resources related to business school education. We've got an article going out next week, which is all about how to land an internship and successfully launch your career with another CBS alum. So look out for that. And I guess the final thing to say is thank you very much and goodbye.